Well, hello, good evening, and welcome to episode 120 of Fracking Nightmare. Now, unfortunately, this evening's program is going to be a little bit truncated because, as you can probably hear, my voice is struggling somewhat. We did have a rather extended episode of Humanity versus Insanity tonight with my guest Mark Steele, where we dug deeper into the dangers associated with 5G. Now, we've been on the anti-fracking campaign basically since, certainly since 2012, when the moratorium was lifted. And I know that obviously many people were actually on the case before that. So we've had 6 years to try to prevent the abomination of fracking from taking place here in the UK. With 5G, which is far more pernicious, we have perhaps 2 years, as the intended rollout is late 2020, early 2021. As is always the case, I encourage people to do their own research, and just as people were dismissive 5 and 6 years ago about the dangers associated with fracking, and then when they did their own research, understood the magnitude of the threat, and I predict that it will be the same with 5G and LED street lighting, but we don't have 6 years. Well, I'm going to leave it there with 5G and LED street lighting for the moment, but I would implore people to watch episode 110 of Humanity versus Insanity, where my guest was Mark Steele. Well, of course, right at the front end of everyone's mind right now in the anti-fracking community are the events unfolding at Preston New Road. And of course, it's become increasingly a concern as the number of minor tremors seems to increase daily almost at Preston New Road. But let's take a look at what's occurring here. This was the Times today. Cuadrilla fracking causes 4 quakes in a day. And of course, yesterday, the most significant one measured 0.48, as Francis Egan of Cuadrilla was very quick to point out that it was below the 0.5, the limit on the traffic light system established as a result of the Royal Society report back in 2012. And what's interesting is the intellectual agility, and of course emotional agility as well, because Francis Egan, has proven over the last 6 years, since he was appointed as Chief Executive Officer of Cuadrilla in early 2013, that he has absolutely no concern, no regard whatsoever for the health and well-being, whether it be physical or emotional, of the people in the licensed area in the Fylde Peninsula. So he trots out the palliatives that, well, we weren't actually fracking at the time, but so what? He claims that, basically, as we weren't fracking, well, probably wasn't anything to do with us. Well, we know it was. And despite the fact that you have the remarkable ability to convince yourself that that's the case, Francis, the rest of the population knows fine well that what's occurring beneath Blackpool right now is directly attributable to your activities at Preston New Road. So here's the printout from the British Geological Survey, and as we can see, Blackpool has effectively taken over from Ollerton in Nottinghamshire as the earthquake capital of the UK. Now, apart from this tremor beneath Festiniog in North Wales, which I'm sure is unrelated to Cuadrilla's activities, but there's 2 others, but this one here, Newdigate, Surrey. And whereas Surrey had extremely stable geology up until April the 1st of this year, and so Newdigate has become the earthquake capital of southern England, and Newdigate happens to be, give or take, but about halfway between the unconventional well sites of UCOG at Horse Hill and Angus Energy at Brockham. And again, apart from this one, somewhat, 430 kilometres northeast of Lerwick in the Shetlands, but all of the other tremors recorded have been at Blackpool. Now, they all are minor. But as we see, we have 0.5, 0.48, 0.4, and then, one today at just shy of 3 o'clock, which was 0.3. So what's happening here? Well, first of all, let's understand perhaps the Richter scale, because a few people seem to have a real awareness of what this means. Now, the Richter scale is logarithmic, which basically means that in every increase of in every increase of 1, then the magnitude of the earthquake is effectively 3 times that size. So what you see here is 0 to 1 is the equivalent of 20 kilograms of dynamite. 2, 600 kilograms of dynamite. 3, 20,000 kilograms of dynamite. 4, 60,000 kilograms of dynamite, and so on and so forth. And it is recognized that basically once an earthquake gets above the level of 3 on the Richter scale, that's the point at which it starts to be felt at the surface, and there is the likelihood of damage to property at the surface. Now, going back to 2011, when the moratorium was put in place, the 2 most significant seismic events occurred on April the 1st, which was 2.3, and then May 27th, 1.5. Now, in of themselves, that's not particularly high, but of course, the Filed Peninsula was regarded as geologically stable. That can no longer be the case. Well, where did this traffic light system come from? Well, in during the period of the moratorium, the Royal Society produced this report published in June 2012. Now, it's generally regarded that this report is, of course, out of date, and the British government has stated that there will be a new report commissioned, taking account of new developments and changes, if you like, in the technology and understanding of the process. But in that report, on I believe it's page 46, there is this paragraph. It says the energy released during hydraulic fracturing is less than the energy released by the collapse of open voids in rock formations, as occurs during coal mining. The intensity of seismicity induced by hydraulic fracturing is likely to be smaller due to the greater depth at which shale gas is extracted compared to the shallower depth of coal mining. Magnitude 3 on the Richter scale may be a realistic upper limit for seismicity induced by hydraulic fracturing. If a seismic event of magnitude 3 occurs at depths of 2 to 3 kilometers, structural damage at the surface is unlikely, but what it omits to say is that anything above 3 is likely to be felt at the surface. So it was acknowledged, even with the publication of this report, that the likelihood is that this traffic light system, which is applied by the Oil and Gas Authority today, is likely to be inappropriate in the longer term. And in fact, I recall that there was an observation made in the aftermath of the publication of the Royal Society report that it was quite probable that once this industry got into production, then the likelihood was that the limit of seismic activity, which caused the process to be halted, would need to be lifted to 3.5. But there are some very, very significant concerns about this process. First of all, we have to make the observation that the Priest Hall tremors were as the result of fracturing a vertical well. And what we do know is that those tremors damaged the well. And despite the Cuadrilla knowing that they damaged the well, as I presented in the court hearing in an attempt to get the injunction dismissed back in July, they carried on pumping. So, we know we're dealing with a cowboy outfit. But this time round, we have a horizontal well. And this brings in a completely different ballgame. Because when they damaged the vertical well, then basically the well was history. and they effectively had to plug the well. With a horizontal section, if this section is damaged, and obviously they're fracking, or they're attempting to frack right now, what they're doing is actually increasing the pressure very gently, because at the moment, what they're trying to do is establish the break point of the geology. So what they're doing is effectively a process known as mini fracking. Now, I will readily acknowledge this is my speculation, but I don't believe that they have fired the pumps up yet to the pressure that they ultimately need to inject into the geology to get any significant flow rate of gas. So even just achieving pressures at which the geology starts to give way is causing these minor tremors. And so what Francis Egan and the geologists and the British government will be concerned about right now is if they fire up the pumps too quickly and increase the pressure too quickly, then it will trigger a significant seismic event, which of course would bring this industry crashing down, because there would be the popular call all around the country to end this before it gets out of control. The problem being is that if in the process they damage the horizontal section, they simply plug the horizontal section and then they drill another horizontal section, either above or below the well that they've been plugged. So let's have a look at what's occurring in this graphic here. Here's the well site, and the two horizontal wells come out in a westerly direction from that well site. So each of the determined epicenters of these seismic events are right at the far end of the horizontal section. So if I go back to this, basically all of these seismic events, this is obviously a vertical plan, but if it was horizontal, then basically what we'd be looking at is all these seismic events around this end of the well. And as they move up along the well, because this well is going to obviously have multiple sections of frack, so what we're likely to see, obviously, is these seismic events will start occurring in this area here. And of course, it's the people who live in this area here who right now are at most risk. I mean, the bottom line is people who live in this area, their properties are completely unsaleable. These properties are effectively worthless. Basically, even if these people wanted to move, there's no possibility of them finding a buyer. The only possibility is them literally walking away from their property and finding somewhere that is more geologically stable, i.e. isn't likely to be targeted for fracking. And of course, these properties here are also at risk. Now, these are the properties, of course, that they've already received, a bung from Cuadrilla as part of the process of buying their silence, because those who have taken the money, I doubt very much that it was just gifted, no such thing as a free lunch, and basically what came with it was the receipt and release, which stated that even if there was any concerns, having taken the money, they wouldn't blame Cuadrilla, and they would claim that it had nothing at all to do with Cuadrilla. But of course, the evidence as produced by the British Geological Survey is telling the story. And I think what we can expect to see over the coming days, weeks, and probably months, because Cuadrilla are going to be increasing the pressure from the frac pumps in microscopic scale in an attempt to avoid triggering that definitive seismic event which leads to calls for the industry to be shut down. The bottom line is it's not rocket science, and you don't really need to be a geologist to actually extrapolate what's likely to occur here. Obviously, Francis Egan, he's drawing some £500,000 a year in compensation and benefits. So he's going to drag this out as long as he possibly can. And the bottom line is that when it does all come crashing down, he's probably going to walk away with a nice little bonus. So, basically his game is just to keep the salary checks rolling in as long as he possibly can. Well, there are claims that, no, we can manage this process and, people have got nothing to worry about. Well, what has been flagged up recently, of course, and we've discussed this on previous episodes of Fracking Nightmare, is what's occurring in Northern Holland. Now, this is pertinent, not least because the gas field in Northern Holland that has led to these massive protests is a conventional gas field. It's not a frack site. So let's take a look at the gas field that we're talking about here. Here it is. It's the Groningen gas field up in the northeastern corner of the Netherlands. So let's bring up that plan a bit. There it is. So this is the area here. Okay. And the gas has been mined from the geology in this area for close on now 50 years. And it's only in the last few years that there has been significant, and as we'll see, very significant impact at surface level. Now, of course, Cuadrilla and all the other unconventional gas companies in the UK keep stating, well, nothing could happen. This is so far beneath the surface, it's not going to have any impact on the surface. Well, the gas being mined from this conventional field in northeastern Holland is actually at a deeper level than that which Cuadrilla are targeting in the Boland Shale. In addition, there are a lot less well sites than there would be in the Fylde Peninsula because this is a conventional gas field. So it's conventional geology. So the geology has a natural permeability and natural porosity. So you don't need to sink so many wells because the gas will flow into the nearest available portal. Well, like I said, the gas has been mined here for, I think it was first mined in the late 1960s, but then it really got into full production in the late 1980s. But the seismic activity started to appear in the mid-80s, and as you can see here, it was initially very small. It started to increase in the 90s. This is the number of earthquakes up here. And then as we get into the 21st century, we see the number of seismic events increasing significantly to well over 100 in 2012. This was 2013. And the seismic activity has increased significantly over the last 5 years. Well, basically after this data was produced, not perhaps before time, an environmental impact assessment was commissioned. And as you can see here, this is the abstract. And let's have a look at what the abstract says. It says gas extraction from the Groningen gas field in the northern Netherlands has led to localized earthquakes, which are projected to become more severe. The social impacts experienced by local residents include damage to property, declining house prices, concerns about the chance of dikes breaking, feelings of anxiety and insecurity, health issues and anger. These social and emotional impacts are exacerbated by the increasing distrust Groningen people have towards the national government and the gas company NAM, a partnership between Shell and Exxon-Mobil. The earthquakes have reopened discussions about the distribution of benefits from gas production and the extent to which benefits are retained locally. Mitigation of the impacts is attempted, but the lack of trust decreases the effectiveness of the mitigation measures. The extent of this experience of previously unforeseen anticipated impacts suggests that a new social and environmental impact assessment needs to be undertaken, and a new social impact management plan an impacts and benefits agreement developed so that the project can retain its legitimacy and social license to operate. In addition to conventional gas, this paper has wider relevance for unconventional gas developments, for example, shale gas extraction by hydraulic fracturing methods. So this is crucial reading because, to the best of my knowledge, there has not been any study or any environmental impact assessment on the social and emotional impacts of this industry. And basically, what we see trotted out are the palliatives of sociopaths who are either on the payroll or directly or indirectly, i.e. they're in government or they're appointed to positions like Shale Gas Commissioner, which we'll look at in a little while. So, as we've seen, this is the situation. The earthquakes didn't start immediately. It was a few years, quite some years, after production basically was ramped up. And then over the period of 20 plus years, we see the earthquakes increase. So imagine the situation in the UK, because what we have is a few wells dotted around northern Holland. But if the unconventional gas industry gets underway in the UK, there will be well in excess of 4,000 sites across the licensed areas in the Bowland Shale. So that's the academic study, that's the abstract from the environmental impact assessment. But let's have a look at the physical reality of these seismic events in northern Holland. So, please go online yourself. Just put into your search engine Groningen gas damage or Groningen earthquakes, and you will find literally hundreds of photographs of damaged properties. And whilst the community have received some benefits, this is what is termed mitigation, i.e. bribing the local community to take the money and just live with the problems that have been created. But as it said in this report, the social and emotional impacts are exacerbated by increasing distrust towards Groningen that people have developed towards the national government and the gas company. Well, that distrust is growing exponentially and is growing every single day that the government allows Cuadrilla to keep firing up the pumps and generating seismic activity. Well, of course, the British government wants to make this easier for the gas companies. They want to make fracking, or certainly the exploratory drilling, permitted development. In other words, that there's no need for any consultation with the local community once the unconventional gas company, the Mother-Frackers, once they actually have access to the land, either by acquisition or by renting from landowners, they can simply rock up and drill a well. But they can't frack. They would still have to go through the process, but they can drill a well. And that should obviously flag up other concerns, particularly concerns about that borehole being used ultimately for the disposal of highly toxic nuclear waste, which is what the government has effectively created the way to achieve with the amendments to the Infrastructure Act in the spring of 2015. Well, we are now literally in the last couple of hours or so of the consultation period for permitted development. And every single local authority, whether it be parish, district, or county council that has taken a vote on whether or not to accede to the government proposition on permitted development, has rejected the proposition resoundingly. And at a recent APPG meeting in Parliament, then senior planning officials from around the country, as well as senior councillors and council officials, have all made the observation to the British government that if they do this, it will undermine the democratic process. It will simply, drive a 10-ton truck through all existing planning processes, because if you do it for unconventional gas exploration, what else are you going to do it with? Because you've set the precedent. Well, earlier today, some petitions were submitted to let the government know of the feelings around the communities, and apparently these petitions had in excess of some 300,000 signatures. So if you still have yet to respond to this consultation, then in the next couple of hours or so, before midnight on Thursday, 25th of October 2018, I would encourage you to go to this website, the Frackfreerider website, where there are some guidelines on offering a response to this survey. So take a look. But, as far as I'm concerned, this is a win-win, because if the government decides to ride roughshod over all of the councils that have rejected this proposition, to ride roughshod over the planning professionals, the council officers, who have all let it be known that this is not an appropriate process, and even Tory MPs that have said this is a vote loser, along with the wider issue of fracking. It's a vote loser. So by all means, go ahead and implement permitted development, because it will cause such a social stir, the like of which hasn't been seen in this country since the mass uprising against poll tax. So my sense is that common sense will prevail. And the only person who even begins to give me any confidence that there is some common sense at work here is Greg Clark, because pretty much everyone around him basically demonstrates that this is a quality that they are seriously lacking. So they will be pushing for it, pushing on the basis that the industry has demanded it. But yet the people have said a resounding no. This goes completely against the whole philosophy of localism. Well, who's at the forefront of driving this? Well, it's these two ladies who probably have about a room temperature IQ between them. We see Claire Perry on the left, the Minister of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy, who, despite her rhetoric pushing this industry, has recently made the admission that she has yet to visit an unconventional gas site, and certainly has not been anywhere near PNR. Well, Claire Perry, I believe, is a former barrister, and of course she demonstrates the classic barrister quality as epitomised by the likes of Tony Blair. In other words, she can take a brief literally 2 minutes before giving a presentation on a subject and present it as though it's a heartfelt held view. And then 2 minutes after she's delivered that heartfelt view, she's completely forgotten what she said, which is why we see her contradicting herself and why we see her caught out so often. But as MP for Devizes in Wiltshire, of course, her constituency is never really going to be under any threat of being fracked. And then on the right of the picture, we see Natasha Engel, the failed MP, drummed out of her constituency in North East Derbyshire because of her pro-fracking stance, which was very much against the party because she was the Labour MP. So a traditional Labour stronghold in North East Derbyshire was effectively sacrificed because of the intransigence of Natasha Engel. Now, who had she been bought by? Well, after she was drummed out of Parliament, she was immediately offered the opportunity to go onto the INEOS payroll, where she was supposedly going to write a brochure to be available to the general public to convince them that actually there was nothing at all to worry about fracking. But it seems that her writing skills weren't perhaps up to much, and so that relationship didn't go very far. Well, she also set up her own consulting company in July of 2017, Palace Yard Communications. And one of her first clients seems to be TWC Communications, which is headed up by Lord Polak. And apart from being a senior member of Conservatives or Conservative Friends of Israel, he is also very closely tied in with Elbit Systems, which is the Israeli weapons company that manufactures the illegal weaponry of white phosphorus bombs and cluster bombs. So Natasha Engels, sort of pimping herself out now that she's out of Parliament and appears to have absolutely no regard for whom her clients might be, and therefore is, of course, the perfect candidate to be appointed Shale Gas Commissioner. No independence whatsoever, and she will obviously just pimp on behalf of the unconventional gas industry. Well, these two ladies are effectively out on the front line to protect the career of this man, Greg Clark, the Secretary of State for Business, Energy and Industrial Strategy. Now, Greg Clark doesn't seek the limelight. He doesn't seek media attention, which is why he has put these two women in their respective roles, because they do. They love the camera. They love hearing the sound of their own voice, even though they don't pay attention to what comes out of their mouths. But nonetheless, they are there to protect his career. Well, I think that, it's time to make it very clear, Greg, that, ultimately you are accountable. You may delegate the responsibility, but you are accountable. And so certainly the people of Lancashire, who are going to experience increasing seismic activity, particularly around the estates that we identified earlier to the west of the well site. But as this sorry industry tries to convince you and others that it has a future, that it has a viability, then inversely, the likelihood of your career rising in the direction that you think it should is greatly reduced. So, these are the people to watch. Claire Perry, Natasha Engel, but they're protecting the career of Greg Clark. Now, I know that everybody is going to be watching very, very closely what unfolds at Preston New Road. And basically, my prediction is that this is not going to end well for Cuadrilla. It's not going to end well for the unconventional gas industry in the UK. And, Groningen should be a wake-up call. No, it wasn't fracking. It was conventional geology, but at a much deeper level than Cuadrilla are trying to extract shale gas from beneath the residents of Blackpool. So, watch this space, but don't think for 1 minute that they're going to stop at 0.5. That traffic light system is there just as an initial guide, and it only means they have to stop pumping on the day. What they're hoping is that people become accustomed to 0.4, 0.5, and then 0.6, 0.7, 0.81. And when people realise that, well, actually, there's no movement on the surface, and then it goes up, and it keeps going up until it gets to 3. And then they might start to be concerned. But what they're doing is they are pump priming, no pun intended, they are pump priming for significant seismic activity at some future date. Just look at the experience of the people of Groningen and to expect a different outcome, to expect a different result in Blackpool and then ultimately across the north of England is somewhat disturbing, to say the least. So anyway, I'm going to call it a halt, I think, at that point. So because of my voice, I'm not going to be doing a live stream tomorrow morning. I'm going to rest my voice over the next few days, but I will be back with a live stream on Monday morning at 8:30 a.m. Meanwhile, the fat lady has definitely warmed up. She's gargled and she's walking towards the dressing room door. She hasn't yet made her way to the stage, but that fat lady is not far off singing. And Francis Egan, just like John Dewar and Andrew, whatever his name was, formerly of IGAS, David Lenigas, you need to start thinking very seriously about your exit strategy, because my prediction is this time next year, you might be a millionaire, but it'll be because of your severance payment from Cuadrilla. You have a great night, have a great weekend, and I'll be back with you on Monday, and watch those tremors on the British Geological Survey's website. Take care. See you soon.